So what we're going to show is just basic tape measure usage. Okay, tape measures can come in a variety of sizes. Standard when you're getting into, say, woodworking or just trades in general, you might get a 16 footer or a 25 footer. All right. Some people don't carry a 25 footer because they don't like it because it's bulkier. A 16 footer, you know, they feel they can get what they need. But if you're measuring anything over 16 foot, obviously you want to go with something at least like a 25. I agree, anything after a 25 footer, it's a little bit too bulky for day to day. Now, this is a DeWalt 25 foot tape measure, but most are pretty standard, except things are changing. So this, the way that you see this across here, you have your inch and going on, and you have all these little lines in between. Right now, they make what I call cheater tapes, okay? And people really like these, and they're great for learning. They do have a purpose, don't get me wrong. And what they do is they explain what every little line is. So every little line that we see there, like going from like the 8 to the 9, every line represents a 16th. When we get to this line right here, the 4th line, okay, that represents a quarter. So it's 4/16. Break it down to a simple fraction, you have a quarter. When you get to the large middle line, that's a half. That's 8/16. Break it down, 1/2. You get to this third larger line over here. That's 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, 12/16. Break it down, and then all the way to the 9, so we have a full inch. Everything in between is a 16th then, or an 1/8. So if we do one little line, it's 8 1/16. If we do two little lines, it's at 8 1/8. Three little lines, 8 3/16. We go past the half by 1/16, we have 8 9/16. We go another 16th past, we have 8 5/8. So you don't typically say 10/16, you'll say 5/8 because you break down the fraction into simpler forms. Now, there are tape measures that list all that, and that's great if you're learning. But use that tape measure for a little bit and then set it aside and get a tape measure that's like this, okay? Because you really need to understand it, because you will be handed a tape measure like this. You might be out on a job and your tape measure breaks and somebody hands you this and you're counting little lines. You don't want to be doing that. You want to understand, because this is critical, especially if you're trying to get very fine measurements in trim carpentry or sizing up for something. You want to make sure that you're really spot on. Now, some of the other things that are on a tape. So when I get to 16, it's in red, right? When I get to 32, it's in red. When I get to 48, it's in red. Why do they do that on a tape measure? Typically when you're framing, you're 16 on center for your 2x4s. And I want to make certain that people understand what that means, because oftentimes it's overlooked, okay? 16 inches on center. If you have 2x4s that are in a wall, that means to the center of this 2x4, okay, over to the center of this one, the center is 16, okay? It's not the gap in between these two that is 16, okay? It's the center. Now, 16 inch on center usually has to be for a support wall. You can get away with 22 inch on center for a transition wall, but I just make everything 16 on center. That way you walk to a wall, there you are, okay? So the tape measure also, after the 1 foot mark, you start seeing these red numbers, okay? And they go all the way up to 11. Then at the 2 foot mark, it starts back and goes all the way to 11 and keeps going. What those are there for is if you're not giving a measurement in inches, but you're giving it in feet. So somebody says, hey, how long is this? And you measure something that's a little longer like this, okay? So we would take this, we hook our tape, and this is important, okay? You hook your tape on the end, and you take it all the way through, and If I'm doing a fine measurement, I'm at 43 1/8, slightly heavy, okay? And you'll get that too, right? It may fall in between, all right? So if it falls in between, you might say 43 1/8 heavy. If it's a little before, you might say 43 1/8 light. That's important if you're reading off a measurement to somebody so they know where to cut. But if I don't do it in inches, I could say, okay, it's 3 feet, 7 inches heavy. Okay, so here's my 3 feet, and then I look at my red numbers, right? And there's 7 inches. So somebody might say that board is 3'7". Somebody else would say, well, if you really get down to it, the board is 43 inches, eighth heavy. But that's the important part of it. So you could read on this tape, you could read in inches, you could read in feet, okay? Also, the tape is not just one-sided on this one, it's on the other one, okay? Older tapes were only sided on one, but in people trying to figure out measurements, they always had to kind of twist the tape if it was set up a certain way. This way you could read it from both sides. The metal piece that's on the end here is made to slightly go in and then pull out. Why does it move that way? Well, simply put, if you're measuring up to something, it will push in to give you that measurement. So see how that board is about 5 inches? I take that board away, I pull it out, and we're right around the 5. But see how it pulls slightly? So it's actually giving us closer to 4 7/8. It's important for you to understand that these inside measurements, even though they make this move, right, and it's supposed to compensate, it doesn't always do it effectively, okay? So sometimes what you'll have to do is you'll have to measure inside here, make a mark, and then measure the other part if you're going in between walls or something, for example, to get an accurate measurement. So to put it like this, if I had a wall here and a wall here, okay, and I'm measuring, say, for a countertop or a cabinet, I don't bend my tape over. A lot of people like to do this, right? And they look at it and go, okay, that's 9 1/4 inches. What I do is I'll measure in here and come to an even number, say a 4. I mark that on there, then I take my measurement and I take it to the other side and I measure up to that 4. Now I know that I have an accurate measurement inside there, okay? Rather than when people like to roll a tape up like this and go, hey, that's, it's 9 inches or something. That's not accurate. That's not how a tape should be used to be able to measure something accurately. If you take your tape measure and you drop your tape measure and it bends this that is at 90 degrees, bends it in or pushes it out, you need to bend it back, because now your measurements where this grabs, it will not be accurate. And being a 16th off or an 1/8 off, if you're rough framing with 2x4s, might work. But fine carpentry, you're gonna be having a real bad day trying to get everything. So a tape measure itself, right, your basic principles are maintain your tape measure, okay? Make sure that you check it so it's not breaking. And another thing too, is as tapes go in and out, okay, they have a locking button on it, okay? Some lock from the bottom, some have a lock from this way, so that you could be sitting there, and if you're trying to get multiple measurements, you don't got to hold the tape and you can do what you have to. But as soon as that's done, people unlock it and they let their tape throw back as hard as it can, okay? That's a good way to start messing up your tape in there. And when you do that, eventually your tape is going to start binding. And when your tape starts binding, you're going to go to pull it out, okay? And it's not going to pull out smooth like this, and you're going to go to put it back in and it's going to start kinking. And when it starts kinking, this is just metal, okay? It will start tearing almost. And when it starts doing that, that's a good way for you to start getting cut, for for your tape to not be accurate, oftentimes right here where the rivets are, okay, it end up breaking away there because people don't take their tape measure and simply just unhook it. They're yanking it on here. And when you're constantly yanking this down, you're putting a lot of stress on the end of this. And that's another area that you can rip the tape measure. So tape measure maintenance is just simply not beating it up as you're using it, okay? Understanding, and you know, if you unlock it, just feed it back in with your hand slightly, you know, and let it go. Don't drop it, and understand that having a tape that doesn't have all the cheater stuff on it is eventually where you want to get to, so that you can sit here and you can use any tape and you understand how it is. Now, a lot of tapes too, they'll boast when you buy them about how you can extend it out and you can keep going and everything like that, and it will hold until it snaps. Is that worth it? Yeah, to an extent it is. Okay, but see how I'm bringing it back? Because if you go cheap on a tape measure, you will get a thinner tape. Usually you want something like this that's almost 1 inch wide, okay? You will get a thinner tape, it will break more, you will not get the measurements you need. So when it comes to a tape measure, and it doesn't have to be a super name brand, it just has to be something that's heavier duty, but don't go cheap on it. Make sure that you have something that's sustainable, it can hold up. This one has more of a plastic casing so it can get smacked a little bit more rather than metal ones. And also make sure that you maintain your clip on it, okay? So if you're using this on your belt clip, wherever you're using it, make sure you don't let this bend all the way out so that your tape's falling all the time. You know, basic maintenance on your tape goes a long way to the life of that tape, and understanding all the little extra things that they put on tape measures. And I only went over a few of the key ones, but usually you'll get a booklet with it, or you can look up some other things online on the booklets on it, and it will show you all the other advantages, so that it kind of does a lot of the math for you. So people take it for granted, but knowing how to read a tape effectively and maintain it can go a long way to you having success in what you need to do.